Hey everyone, and welcome to the Pivot by Maltego. And today's special guest is Gisela Perez de Acha. So, Gisela, welcome to the show today.
Hi, Brad. Thank you so
Um,
much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
it's a pleasure to have you. How are you? What's happening in your life these days?
I'm good. Thank you for asking. I am in San Francisco. It's a little rainy, which is always good news after all the fires. And I have been fact checking 700,073 rows of flight tracking data for a story that we're about to publish. So that has been the bulk of my time lately with my team of students. And I can tell you more about that in a bit, but I'm very much in a flight tracking mode at the moment.
That sounds exciting, but maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and the inner cyborg.
Oh, I love that. Very provocative question. Well, my name is Gisela. I am 33 years old. I currently teach at UC Berkeley's Graduate School of Journalism. I teach open source investigations, and I work as an investigative reporter as well. I used to be a lawyer. I am a cybersecurity lawyer, so a data privacy lawyer. And when you and I were talking backstage, off stage, I think one of the things a lot of people ask me, like, how did you get here? Like, how does a 33-year-old Mexican woman get to change careers from law to journalism and investigative reporting, and then teach and manage large teams of students for investigative reporting and OSINT and open source? And I think I was telling you that one of the moments that truly, really changed me was reading Donna Haraway's book. For those who don't know her, she is a feminist who wrote in the 80s. She's actually living here in Santa Cruz. But she wrote Cyborg Manifesto in the 80s. And that book changed my life. And that book changed my way of seeing the world, seeing myself, and seeing the internet, as a lot of feminism often does, how the personal is political and vice versa. But essentially, the inner cyborg, I believe that all of us are cyborgs. We are all data in the end. All our thoughts, all our wants, our needs, our fears, our cravings. Our work. I always joke with my students that I'm always holding my phone in my hand and I go to sleep next to it. And if I don't have the phone in my hand, I feel like I've lost an arm or something. But I really like this approach to technology because it also, Donna Haraway uses the metaphor of a cyborg as a recipient for techno-utopianism in a very different way that tech bros from Silicon Valley, not move fast and break things, but rather let's think about the cyborg as a metaphor, a poetic metaphor through which we can push technological boundaries, and through which we can think of technology as being part of ourselves and apply some of the very basic principles of feminism to technology, like radical consent, for example, right? And our data privacy, or autonomy, which is one of my favorite when coming to technology and infrastructure in general. So I think starting from there, that's what really has marked, that book has really, and that theoretical framework has really marked my career, first as a lawyer working in data privacy laws, and then as an investigative reporter.
I mean that that sounds really interesting to me. I remember when we spoke about it the first time, I thought this was really inspiring, and I think everyone needs some sort of inspiration to get into where they want to be in life. I think I mean there's also the Hackers Manifesto, right? Which which I think inspired a lot of us to sort of start trolling in code and playing with code and seeing what you can make code do, right? But is this also part of why you got into like Intel and investigations as well?
So I guess partly, but really what made me get into, I guess, open source investigations in general was the 2017 earthquake in Mexico City. It was September 19th, 2017. I will never forget that day. I was in my office on a Zoom call, which I think was Skype back then or something. Zoom wasn't, maybe FaceTime. And it's like if all of a sudden the laws of gravity suspended and everything was shaking around me in a really scary way. I remember rushing outside because that's what you do in Mexico. I have since learned that in other parts of the world, you don't run outside. But Mexico City is actually built on a lake, on top of a lake. So the foundations of the city are not very solid, which is why the likelihood of buildings collapsing is actually higher than in other parts of the world. So you just rush outside. And I remember that was the first time that I thought, I'm going to die. Like everything around me was literally collapsing. There was a construction building in front of me and people were falling off of it. It was hugely traumatic. And yeah, it was really hardcore. And I was in the famous Roma neighborhood, if you have watched the film. And it kind of became ground zero for the earthquake. And I think it was right after the 2016 elections. So I think that was one of the first sort of natural catastrophes that was also rife with disinformation and misinformation. I remember my grandma sending me photos that were completely fake, of bridges collapsing or bridges that were broken. And WhatsApp became such a vital tool for communicating because lines were down, electricity was down, the whole neighborhood was smelling like gas. And me and a couple of friends got together and we actually started this crowdsourcing effort with over 500 volunteers to fact check information. And we did it so well that we became the primary source of facts in the middle of the emergency, because there were still people who were trapped under the rubble and we had to get the resources to the places to be able to dig them out. And it had to be quickly because people cannot survive a lot of time under the rubble. So after that, it was a really tough 10 days of, not eating, not sleeping. But after that, I realized the power of harnessing social media for fact-checking purposes and fact-gathering purposes. So I quit my career as a lawyer. I used to work in data privacy at an NGO, at an international NGO. Applied to the Graduate School of Journalism at UC Berkeley and decided I didn't even know how, it was just an intuition, but I knew that was the path that I wanted to take. From there, I met the Human Rights Center. I currently work with them now. And they have this amazing space, the Human Rights Center Investigations Lab, with over 100 students, 30 different languages, mostly women, mostly people of color, which is incredible in the OSINT space. And I just knew that I had found my tribe and I knew that I had found my jam. I still remember feeling butterflies in my stomach with excitement when I learned how to geolocate, for example, right? But it was a combination of knowing that I am data and that we're all data. And so that very traumatic experience, that was definitely an inflection point in my career.
Now that's amazing. So it kind of all came together in the end, didn't it? That's that itself is inspiring to me. But you said something really interesting. So you're with the you're with the Berkeley, right? You're also with the Pen America. You're doing training. You're also a journalist, essentially. Well, a reporter, and you also do these amazing OSINT investigations. How do you balance all of that? How's it? What keeps you going?
Oof, that's a very good question. First of all, I love what I do. I remember being very bored when I was a lawyer. Don't tell my former bosses. But I remember being very bored and just, that sensation of boredom and how it slowly eats you alive. I've always been a cybersecurity and digital security instructor or teacher. I'm not technical, like I don't code, but I'm really good at OPSEC because I grew up as a Mexican woman and I was litigating, for journalists who were then murdered, and we live in a narco state. So I think risk was in digital risk was something inherent in growing up in Mexico, and because of my cyber mentality, that's something that I've always been interested in, and I especially focus on women and young women and how to help them understand technology better and leverage technology better with their own bodies in a respectful and egalitarian way. So when I graduated from the Graduate School of Journalism, because of my cybersecurity background, I started doing a lot of extremism research. I was like, this is going to be the thing for 2020. What is the alt-right doing? And I was finding really good stories, but then I was having a hard time putting them together because I didn't have an editor. So eventually, through this research and researching the Boogaloo Boys, I got to speak I got access to a Boogaloo boy who is accused of killing 2 officers of the law here in California. His name is Steven Carrillo. He was in prison, and I interviewed him from prison. I was the only journalist who interviewed him. And when I got access to that, I went to David Barstow, who is the head of the investigative reporting program, and the man with the most Pulitzers in the world. Pulitzer Prizes, for those who are not familiar, are kind of like the Nobel Prize of journalism. And this man has 4. He worked for his entire career at the New York Times, something like 20 years. And I remember going to him and he was telling me, like, I have no budget to hire you. Like, you're incredible, but, we're a small NGO adjacent to the journalism school. And I was like, I don't care. I have a great story and I need an editor. So he adopted me. And that was with that story, which you can read in ProPublica. And we also did a film called American Insurrection, sort of like telling the story of how the Capitol started, like how the Capitol riots came to be. But that was the story that made me a reporter. And it was precisely my cybersecurity background that allowed me to be in the spaces on the internet that other people wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable inhabiting. But I knew that my security was really solid, so I could totally hang out in those chats and those forums without a problem, or I could call those people with a burner number, right? Like just basic things like that, but that most reporters don't necessarily think through. And it's always been kind of like an uphill battle for me to try to bridge the gap with investigative reporting and try to bring in these things like cybersecurity, threat modeling, geolocation and chronolocation, Boolean searches. It's not like, it isn't even rocket science, but I think the generational and cultural divide is just really big. But that story, after talking to Steven Carrillo several times from prison, writing that story, putting that story together, that's the story that made me a journalist. And then eventually PEN America has been asking me, I do consultancies with them for, we train newsrooms in basic digital safety and protecting yourself against online harassment, which is something, again, that as a Mexican woman, I've been through a lot. And there are, like, I think the bottom line is, how do you do it? There are ways to be resilient, and there are ways in which you can tackle these things and not burn out and be mindful about what you're doing. First is the love of the job. Second is the mission of journalism, which is essentially tied to democracy. Third is I adore the people that I work with. I adore them all at the Human Rights Center and the Investigative Reporting Program. They are all incredible human beings. I learn something new every day. I work 6 days a week. I work a lot. I work all the time, but I do take Saturdays off. Saturdays are my day off. I do a lot of yoga. I work out every day. So that's sort of like the balance between the cyborg and also trying to have embodied practices that connect me with myself to keep doing this job, because it's a marathon. It's not a race. So we can't burn out in the middle of the way.
No, absolutely. I think it seems that there's a lot of passion for what you're doing as well. I mean, not just with the Human Rights Watch, but also the journalism. I mean, it seems like you're just built into this whole mentality of the cyborg as well, which is crazy cool. So, talking about OPSEC and digital verification and all of that, has there been anything crazy that you've gotten yourself in, let's say, intertwined in? Maybe something you can talk about, an interesting story, perhaps.
I mean, definitely interviewing someone who's accused of murdering 2 policemen because of an extremist ideology, and being manipulated by him. You know, like in the interview, he was so flirty and he was so charming, and that was one of the craziest experiences I've ever had. When you're interviewing and you're like, why is this man so nice if he's accused of these horrible things? But that's when the journalistic practice comes in and you step back and it's actually the context. And, also this, I don't know, what is it about people who are accused of doing horrible things? They're always charming, charming.
Well,
And
a lot of them get a lot of love letters and stuff as well, from what I've heard.
Exactly, right? I mean, I wonder how many this guy has gotten. He's still in prison. He's probably going to get a life sentence. There's actually still death penalty here in California, but he's probably not going to get it. So that was definitely one of the craziest experiences. Other crazy experiences, I guess, include I can't reveal too much of it, but we're doing an immigration story. And one of my favorite things about investigative reporting is how you start off really little and scratching the surface. And then as you pull and pull and pull, all of a sudden there's a monster behind it. So it's just like, wow, like we never thought this was going to be here. So that definitely keeps me on track and keeps me high on the work. But the craziest for sure has been so far in my career, interviewing Steven Carrillo multiple times from prison during COVID, at a very particular and hard moment in the United States, during 2020 and 2021. That nothing will be that for a while. Yeah. And then during COVID, I had to isolate for 14 days afterwards. So, yeah. And it was a time when there was these horrible fires in California that we were also monitoring. So it just definitely felt like the world was going to end, and it was a very dark period, but I'm really thankful that I got the opportunity, and also the sublimation of writing. I played this song on repeat, this Motorrad song on repeat as I was writing this one piece, and just how healing it is and how cathartic it is once you get the piece out, and once you sort of all those emotions and all those, I still remember his mugshot. I used to have nightmares about his mugshot. So, but yeah, nothing will beat that craziness of that particular experience.
Yeah, I don't think people give reporters and investigative reporters or investigative journalists the respect that they deserve in the hell that you go through to do what you actually do. I don't think people actually realize the amount of work and effort that goes into it, really. But yeah, what can I say?
Yeah, we were recently at at an award ceremony with a bunch of other investigative journalists in New York, and it's definitely stories taking over your life, and it was a really cool tribe feeling to it, of we're all in it for the same thing, which is hold power accountable in whatever way, shape, or form, but it is definitely, it takes a lot of self-care to not break and not go crazy. So I appreciate you appreciating us.
Yeah, no, it's just the fact of the matter. I mean, when I was growing up, back where I'm originally from, it was wartime as well, and I've seen journalists who uncovered really, compromising information. Just they're gone off the map in a couple of weeks, and that's and that's kind of crazy to see as well. And I don't know about you, but have you ever been in a situation where your investigations have gotten into something intense or kind of worrisome in terms of your own personal safety?
Um, yeah, definitely. I mean, covering extremism was one of the examples, but in my career, I have gotten doxxed. I have gotten, rape and death threats, because it's also like, I'm a woman of color doing this work, reporting in predominantly white supremacist spaces or denouncing machismo in Mexico. And online harassment is always like a social sanction for breaking gender norms, because like, what are we, as a woman, what am I supposed to talk about on the internet? What am I allowed to talk about? Cooking, decoration, babies, fashion, But as soon as you step out of those gender roles and you start discussing politics or sports or, any other, I don't know, cars, like, I don't know, even OSINT, to be honest, like it's such a predominantly male space that sometimes even the backlash comes from that. Just like getting, I don't know, like, I'm not an arms aficionado, like I can ID a couple, but I'm not interested either. I have other things to do. And I once got a weapon wrong on Twitter, and oh my God, it's like, I got a lot of backlash for that. But I think the scariest moment to me was, the worst has been getting rape threats. And in Mexico, it's also really interesting because of how embedded it is with the narco. You get like photos of AK-47s posted with your name and a rape threat, right?
Oh,
so yeah, so it's like it gets very intertwined. But the really cool thing, and what I love about the work that I do with Pen America, is that, like I said, like you learn strategies. I have had to learn strategies to not only survive that, but like rise above that and just really rise to the level where you cannot let it affect you. Or if it does affect you, you learn how to recover quickly. And if there's one thing in the bottom line for if anyone has ever gone through anything of the sort, I think the bottom line is the only thing that saves you at that time is community. The only thing that will really get you out of the rabbit hole that you're in, out of the shame. It feels super shameful. It's paralyzing, when you're like watching movies and there's like a tsunami coming and you're like, run, and it's super paralyzing. It makes you want to silence yourself and stop tweeting. So there's like small little hacks, right, that you can do. Like, I just tweet music. When I'm getting horribly harassed, I just tweet music. Or I start responding to my trolls with like fluffy animals or like puppies or like cute gifs of like kittens, and it's just like, I think the point is not retaliating with abuse, because that will only get you further into the hole, but changing the tone and reaching out to the people that you love and to my tribe, my community of investigative reporters, or my community of feminist activists in Mexico, or my Twitter followers. Hey, everyone, please help me report this troll. But the bottom line is that even though I have been in those really challenging spaces, I do think that there are ways to get out of that. And having lived through that, I'm really passionate about teaching other people and helping other people get out of that so that we can keep doing what we do best, which is tell truth to power and keep speaking up and being as loud as we can.
No, that's pretty cool. So, I mean, Twitter can be a bit of Twitter can be a bit of a hostile space sometimes, couldn't it? And I think especially women in cyber, women in OSINT. I think you said rightly, it's a very male dominated area, and I've been seeing a couple crazy things go down recently as well, where it's just completely unnecessary harassment. Mm, so the question is here, right? Like, apart from just retaliating with fluffy animal pictures and gifs of kittens, um, what about the mental health side of it?
Mm.
How do you deal with that?
Well, first of all, therapy. I don't know how people are on this beat of investigative reporting and verifying war crimes without a therapist. Therapy for all, especially if you are a man listening, go to therapy. Therapy is the best. I always tell my students, we're not going to make it on this beat unless we go to therapy. Shout out to my therapist. He's the absolute best. And by therapy, I mean like a space, a weekly space where I can just talk about how I feel and unpack my emotions. I think that's essential to survival. And like I said, like it's not, even though I am a cyborg, I really, really, really try to connect with my body as much as possible. So eating well, drinking a lot of water, yoga, meditation. I work out every day, like rain or shine. Every day I'm moving my body and just taking, even if it's just 30 minutes of like conscious embodiment outside of the cyber, to just feel myself and be with myself and see how I feel. One little hack that I love for my mental health is I sleep with my phone in the bathroom. So the worst is to wake up and like scroll and first thing in the morning, because it gets your nervous system into a place of urgency, right up work. I have an analog alarm clock, and I wake up with that, and I just I make coffee or tea and then sit with myself, think about my dreams, my emotions, and then I turn my phone on. And that's been such a like little hack that really has helped me. It's all about how we manage our nervous system and how we manage the adrenaline highs and the crashes that go right after. And I mean, last but not least, and I think I've said it, but that's the hardcore bottom line, is the community. I love and adore the people that I work with. I just like, I have so much love for them. And of course, my family and my friends, but no one gets it like your colleagues, No one gets it. Like, that's why I call them my tribe. And we just hold each other during these hard times, and we have a lot of trust and a lot of care for each other. So I feel very blessed and very lucky to be working in a space. And we're also a lot of women. We're mostly women, except for David Barstow. We're only women. So that's also, in this very gendered, bro-y male space, it just feels like a true delight to be able to work with powerful, amazing, smart OSINT women and also teach others, right? Because part of the investigative reporting work that I do, I manage two reporting teams of 10 students each, a combination of computer scientists, law school students, and journalism students, all at the grad school level. And it's sort of like a teaching hospital. So we work on 2 investigative stories a year, only 2 a year. And I manage them, and I'm the supervising reporter and sort of like their immediate editor. We're currently working with the Associated Press and the Center for Investigative Journalism on anti-birth control disinformation, for which Maltigo has been not only very useful, but also very fun. I can't wait to show you the actual, once we publish, the actual visual, like how all Maltigo actually looks like. You would never imagine sort of like the things that come up and the connections that we're starting to make. And then the other one is about the infrastructure of immigration. So essentially how coyotes and travel agencies and airlines connect with each other to recruit migrants and honestly, like just get so much money out of them so that they can make their trip north. So yeah, it's kind of like all things network. And I manage these two reporting stories and the students on it. And we teach the students not only how to report, but how to like OSINT as well, right? It's inherently OSINT stories. And, you know, we're like 17 women and one guy. My students are, I have 18 and there are 17 women and one guy. This amazing Colombian lawyer, shout out to the only guy in our classroom. And it's not like we don't take boys, you know, like, of course not. Like, let everyone can enroll in our class. But I do think that because we're so many women in leadership, it's also been really cool how it's inspiring other young women to follow this path, even though traditionally one would think, oh, this is not a woman's path, right? Or, oh no, tech is not for me. Tech is for other type of people who don't look like me. So that's been really cool and really inspiring to be able to, sort of like leave a seed of my formation and the knowledge that we have built together. And it's also paying it forward for other amazing women who have mentored me and taught me throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think couldn't have said it better myself. But speaking about some of your achievements, right? I think the American Insurrection, the stories on Culiacan, you actually won a Teen Polk Award as well for this, right? On this film.
Yeah, American Insurrection.
What was that like? You know, getting everyone together and getting this kind of. Is it fair to call it a documentary, or is it fair to call it a film?
Yeah, documentary film. You know, it's very rewarding to be recognized for your work, especially, you know, being young and you know, getting started. It's not like I have 20 years doing this. It was really incredible to be in the room full of people who were also investigative reporters and who were going through the same hardships that we all go through, like sacrificing so many personal things for the story and for the passion of telling the story. It was amazing to work with AC Thompson, Rick Rowley. Rick Rowley was the director and AC Thompson is the correspondent. AC Thompson has been covering extremism for like 20 years. And it was just the most amazing learning experiences I've had to be able to film with him and just tag along and talk about how hard it is to cover this beat and how, you know, he's been targeted by him and his family have been actively targeted by neo-Nazis and yeah, and how little support we got from newsrooms, right? How little newsrooms know how to navigate online harassment or doxing or, you know, just cyber attacks in general. So there was definitely a lot of camaraderie. But in the end, I don't know. I mean, to be completely honest, I kind of can't shake off the weird feeling of like, wait, this is not supposed to be about us, you know? This is supposed to be about the story. So it was like, okay, cool, great. We have a Polk. I'll wear that feather on my cap happily, but I'm more interested in the work itself and on the actual stories that I'm working on right now. And it also felt like such a dark story. And interviewing Steven Carrillo and this extremist accused of killing 2 cops. I was really close to his girlfriend, that's the source. So when I published, I kind of thought it would be over. But with Polk, it just seemed like I had to open the can of worms again. So it was definitely, to be completely honest, it was bittersweet. but mostly very rewarding to be recognized and be able to see my colleagues again. Yeah.
It sounds like you did a lot of investigating, right? And this is where I'm going to pivot. I know you mentioned Maltego, and I'm a huge Maltego geek. Not just because of the brand or anything, but I really love the tool and what you can do with it. The amount of just the array of looking at different data and putting it all together. But what are the three, let's say the top three tools that you can't do without?
Hunchly, shout out to Justin. I could have not been able to publish or fact check any of the Carrillo story if it weren't for Hunchly. Because especially in the extremism space, I mean, a lot of these posts and web pages get taken down by extremists themselves or social media companies. So we cannot live without Hunchly. Hunchly is just like my favorite tool. And then I use a lot of Invid. Invid, this, I'm sure you're familiar with it, this plugin to sort of like reverse image search or cut a video into screenshots for reverse image searching. And honestly, finally, since we work across all types of languages, not only on extremism, but disinformation or the immigration story that we're working on right now, the Google Translate desktop plugin.
Okay.
Sorry, not desktop, sort of like browser plugin. It's amazing because you just, with one button, translate this page and the Russian web page is all of a sudden in English, right? So I think those would be my top three. Maltego comes in when we're doing more complex analysis in itself. We've been also using a lot of Aleph, which has been really fun to integrate with all Maltego experience. But definitely my top three are Google Translate, Invid, and Hunchly. And, you know, it's not like, it depends also on the story that I'm working on, right? Like we have a saying, my colleague Stephanie Kraft, I call her the OSINT queen. She's the director of the Human Rights Investigations Lab. We have this saying, let the tools follow the story and not the story follow the tools. Right? Like let your research lead you to, okay, it's like, which hat do I have to wear right now? So like right now I'm doing a lot of flight tracking because the story needs it. But when I started, I didn't know I needed flight tracking, right? And maybe some other story, you know, and we're working across different languages. So Google Translate has been really helpful. Hunchly, I think, is the one thing that always stays across investigations. But that's our sort of like our bottom line is let the story drive the tools and not the tools drive the story. So it will very much depend on the story and the research that we're doing.
Yeah, no, actually, you know, I really couldn't agree more with you because this is something that we see happening quite often. A lot of investigators will throw their whole toolkit at a problem, hoping to have a solution that kind of rises to the top, but it doesn't. I think being specific about what you're aiming for, a specific kind of result that you're aiming for, is probably more time saving and less stressful than throwing the whole kitchen sink at a problem and expecting some sort of solution to suddenly show up out of the blue, right?
Yeah, it's kind of like people who want to save poverty with an app. You know what I mean? It's like, do you understand poverty? Also, poverty where? And also, why do you want to solve it? You know, and I think it's very easy in the OSINT space to sort of like get into this techno solutionist mindset. But that's where I really appreciate my editor, David Barstow. He's recently, we were looking at all these flight tracking data and we were like, Stephanie and I were merging databases and like throwing all our kitchen sink at it. And then David was like, have you actually looked at the data with your own eyes? And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, yeah, have you looked at the data to see if you can pick up patterns with your eyes? Yep. And I was like, oh my God. So I looked at the data with my eyes and it was so obvious. It took me an hour to solve something that we had been trying to merge two databases and like with a unique flight tracking identifier, which was hard to find. And, it's just like, but it was just a really good reminder of this. Don't throw your whole kitchen sink at it. Use your brain, right? Like just use your eyes. And that's usually the low tech solution ends up being the most efficient one most of the time.
Absolutely. I mean, the words right out of my mouth there. So I have an interesting question for you. We both spoke about inspiration. So I was, as I said, I was inspired by the Hackers Manifesto and some stories about hackers and things people would do to get into networks, do some crazy things. Not that I've attempted any of that, maybe. and you with the Cyborg Manifesto. If there's three things you could do or say right now to inspire the listeners out there, or three pieces of advice that you think would be somewhat inspirational, or something that you would say as general advice, what would that be?
That's a good question. So for OSINTers, what would it be? I guess one that I always tell my students is read and devour anything you can about the topic that you're investigating. I feel like so many of the creative investigative processes come from devouring all the books that I can on the topic. So I think reading is definitely one of them. A second one would be embodiment practices. So anything that makes you feel connected with your body, if that's cooking or stretching or, anything that is off screens. And then, I don't know, I guess the third one would be how do we build better community, like building better community circles and being less isolated. It can be very isolating work, even though there are strong online communities. But if there's any way to get involved with just more marginalized sectors or, teach someone who doesn't know how to do it that lives in your city. I think those three things are the most fulfilling for me.
I like that approach. I think a lot of what you've said during this conversation has had a lot to do with embodiment, mental health, taking care of yourself. And I think a lot of us as professionals, we end up dedicating a lot of hours, a lot of time of our lives, right, to what we do. So I think it is important. I think it's amazing that this is recognized. I think a lot of us need to actually appreciate this and perhaps stretch a little bit, go outside for a walk. I was reading recently that just spending 20 minutes a day out in sunshine or in a greener environment helps you alleviate your stresses and gives you a better mindset, allows you to reset and focus. It's something that now that we work at home as well, not many people take advantage of it now that they can, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also in the very urban environments that we work in, it's also harder and harder to get access to those spaces. But it's in the end, it's a marathon, not a race, and we need to survive in it. We can't burn out and we can't quit. So in the end, that's what will make you just last longer and do your work better. And it's where I get all my inspiration from.
It's a great mindset to have. Yeah, I mean, I think it's been a very interesting, definitely a very interesting conversation in terms of the whole investigative topic, journalism, and the embodiment of self-care and all of that. Are you working on any passion projects at the moment?
No,
You're just stretched too thin, though, aren't you? Really?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's just a really busy time. I get some time off during the summers, where I go back to Mexico, so that's really nice. But right now we're like in the thick of publishing, and yeah, it's just I read a lot. I read a lot of fiction just to like sort of like get a break from this world. But right now, passion projects, not really. It's mostly a lot of work and a lot of working out. So that's what I'm mainly focused on. And I love
Amazing.
gardening. I love gardening. I garden a lot.
Gardening. Okay.
Yeah, I do garden every day. I have some weeds right now that have taken over my planters. So yeah, that's I guess that's one of my passions, always latent.
Amazing. Gisela, it's been an honor having you with us. I really did enjoy the conversation. I think don't make yourself scarce. If there's anything that Maltego can do to inspire you, or anywhere where we can see some collaborative inspiration, would be amazing to see a path forward as well.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'm really happy to be part of this Maltego community. I can't wait to learn more from you all. And I'm really looking forward to all the amazing things that we can do together.
Cool. Amazing. Gisela, thank you very much again. Stay safe wherever you are, and see you on the flip side.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brad. It was a pleasure talking to you. And thanks for everyone for listening.